A CEO of a high-end restaurant chain is stressed after discovering sales are dropping nonstop and his staff are exhausted and burned out. The next day, he decides to go undercover as a maintenance worker to find out what's happening and is shocked when he witnesses a chaotic kitchen filled with constant shouting. There, he unexpectedly meets a young woman who quietly works late into the night just to protect the only job she has. Her steady determination reaches him deeply. The CEO decides to reveal who he is, turn everything around, and begin changing both her life and the entire company. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Daniel Whitaker pressed his palm against the floor-to-ceiling window of his 14th-story office, watching Detroit's skyline fade into dusk. The glass was cold. Everything felt cold lately. 52 years old, 23 years building oak and ember from a single storefront in Ann Arbor into 37 locations across the Midwest. He'd built it on a promise: authentic American food from the heart. But right now, his heart was pounding for all the wrong reasons. "Mr. Whitaker," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The quarterly report for Detroit is on your desk." He didn't need to look. He'd already memorized the numbers. Revenue down 27% in 3 months. 6 employees quit in 5 weeks. Customer reviews littered with words like soulless and not what it used to be. Daniel exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass. He turned back to his desk, a sleek expanse of walnut and steel, and sat down. The report stared up at him, but his eyes drifted to the envelope beside it. Plain, white, no return address. He'd opened it an hour ago, hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up again, pulling out the single sheet of paper. The handwriting was uneven, hurried, smudged with what looked like grease or oil. "We work for a company that says people are the core, but nobody feels seen anymore." Daniel read it 3 times. 4, 5. Nobody feels seen. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through graying hair. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, like stars refusing to die. "Sir," his assistant again. "Do you need anything before I head out?" "No," Daniel said quietly. "I'm good." But he wasn't good. He wasn't good at all. The letter haunted him through dinner, through the drive home, through the sleepless hours staring at his bedroom ceiling. Nobody feels seen anymore. At 2:00 a.m. Daniel sat up in bed, switched on the lamp, and grabbed his phone. He scrolled through the Detroit location's employee roster. 32 names, 32 people he'd never met. People who cooked his recipes served. His vision wore his logo on their chests, and he couldn't pick a single one out of a lineup. His chest tightened. "Jesus," he muttered, "what have I become?" He thought about his father, a line cook for 40 years, hands scarred from burns, back bent from standing. His father used to say, "A restaurant dies when the boss stops tasting the food." Daniel hadn't tasted anything in years. Just numbers, just projections, just board meetings and profit margins and expansion plans. He set the phone down and picked up the letter again. The paper was thin, worn at the edges. Someone had folded and unfolded it multiple times before sealing it. Someone had agonized over sending it. Daniel's jaw tightened. "If my people have lost faith," he whispered, "then what the hell am I doing?" Daniel sat at the hotel desk that night, staring at the anonymous letter spread out beside his laptop. Nobody feels seen anymore. He'd read it 20, maybe 30 times now. Each time the words cut deeper. His finger traced the uneven handwriting, the slight smudge of oil in the corner. Someone had written this during a break, probably. Hand still greasy from the fryer, heart pounding with the fear of being discovered. Someone had risked something to tell him the truth. And what had he done? Sat in his glass tower 14 floors above reality, staring at spreadsheets that told him nothing about the people bleeding into those numbers. Daniel leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes. 23 years ago, he'd been the one chopping onions at 4:00 a.m. He'd been the one with grease under his fingernails and flour in his hair. He remembered the weight of a 12-hour shift, the ache in his lower back, the way time moved differently when you were trying to survive versus trying to build something. When had he forgotten that? When had he stopped being there? He opened his eyes and looked at his phone. He could call the Detroit manager right now. Demand answers, fire people, shuffle the org chart. That's what a CEO did, right? Make decisions from above. Clean, efficient, detached. But something in his gut, something old and primal, told him that wouldn't work. You couldn't see the truth from 14 floors up. You couldn't hear it in a conference call. You couldn't feel it in a quarterly report. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Detroit stretched out before him, dark and sprawling, a city that had been knocked down and gotten back up more times than he could count. His father had worked in this city, had bled for it, had believed that honest work and honest food meant something. "If my people have lost faith," Daniel said aloud, his reflection staring back at him in the glass, "then I need to know why. Not guess, not assume, know." He thought about sending in consultants, HR audits, anonymous surveys, all bullshit, all filters between him and the truth. No. If he wanted to understand what was really happening in his restaurant, in his kitchen, with his people, he needed to do something he hadn't done in over a decade. He needed to get his hands dirty. Daniel pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Marcus." "Yeah, it's me. I need a favor, a big one." His COO sounded confused. "Daniel, it's almost midnight. What's going on?" "I'm going undercover," Daniel said. The words felt strange in his mouth, but also right. "Detroit location. I need you to set it up. Fake name, fake background, maintenance worker. Nobody can know who I am. Nobody." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." "Daniel, if this goes wrong, if someone recognizes you, if the press gets wind of it, then let it go wrong." Daniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "Because right now, something's already wrong, and I can't fix it from behind a desk." Another pause. Then Marcus sighed. "All right, give me 3 days." "2," Daniel said. 2 days. Jesus, you really are your father's son, aren't you?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope so." He hung up and looked back at the letter. Nobody feels seen anymore. "I'm coming," he whispered to whoever had written those words, "and I'm going to see everything." 2 days later, Daniel stood in the parking lot of Oak and Ember, Detroit at 5:30 a.m., dressed in clothes he hadn't worn in a decade, a faded denim jacket, scuffed work boots, a baseball cap pulled low. His name tag read Mark Daniels Maintenance. He'd called ahead under a fake consultant firm, arranged the whole thing through intermediaries. Nobody here knew who he was. Nobody would. The restaurant sat on the corner of Michigan Avenue, a converted brick warehouse with iron beams and Edison bulbs, industrial charm, they called it in the design brief. But up close, Daniel noticed things he'd never seen in photos: peeling paint around the doorframe, a dumpster overflowing with trash, a burnt-out bulb in the Oak and Ember sign. He pushed open the door. Inside the dining room was empty prep time, but the noise from the kitchen carried through the walls, metal clanging, voices shouting, something that sounded like breaking glass. Daniel's stomach twisted. He walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen. Chaos. A line cook was hunched over a cutting board, eyes red-rimmed, chopping onions with jerky, uneven strokes. Another was arguing with someone over a missing shipment of chicken. A dishwasher stood at the sink, staring blankly at a mountain of pans, looking like he might cry. And in the center of it all stood Kurt Daniels, no relation, the head chef. Barrel-chested mid-40s, veins bulging in his neck as he barked orders. "Faster! What is this, a goddamn nursing home move?" A young prep cook fumbled with a tray of vegetables. Kurt slammed his hand on the counter. "If you can't keep up, there's the door. I've got 50 people who'd kill for your job." The prep cook flinched, didn't say a word, just kept chopping faster, sloppier. Daniel stood near the door, clipboard in hand, pretending to inspect the walk-in cooler, but his eyes were locked on the scene in front of him. Nobody looked at each other. Nobody smiled. Nobody looked alive. An older woman, maybe 60, hair tied back in a tight bun, walked past Daniel carrying a crate of tomatoes. She caught his eye for a split second, then glanced away. But not before he saw it: exhaustion. Defeat. She muttered under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear, "They call this a family. I've never seen a family treat each other like this." Daniel's throat went dry. He moved toward the storage area, pretending to check the temperature controls. The refrigeration unit was leaking. A slow drip, drip, drip into a bucket someone had shoved underneath. The seal on the walk-in freezer was torn. The floor was slick with condensation. How long had this been broken? "Hey, new guy." Daniel turned. Kurt was staring at him, arms crossed. "Your maintenance, right?" "Yeah," Daniel said, keeping his voice flat. "Mark." "Well, Mark, maybe you can actually fix something around here. Last guy couldn't find his ass with both hands." Daniel nodded. "I'll take a look." Kurt grunted and turned back to his line. "Good, and stay out of the way. We don't have time for distractions." Daniel watched him for a moment longer, watched the way Kurt moved all sharp angles and aggression, like a man who'd forgotten what it meant to lead and only remembered how to control. This wasn't a kitchen. It was a pressure cooker about to explode. The day dragged on. Daniel moved through the restaurant like a ghost, tightening bolts, checking pipes, observing everything. Lunch rush came and went in a blur of shouting and chaos. Dinner service was worse, tickets piling up, orders getting mixed, Kurt's voice cutting through the noise like a whip. By 9:00 p.m., the last customer left. The servers cleaned their stations in silence. The kitchen staff filed out one by one, dragging their feet, barely speaking. Daniel lingered, pretending to tighten a loose bolt on one of the prep tables. When the last person left, the kitchen fell silent. Daniel exhaled, pulling off his cap and wiping sweat from his forehead. He walked slowly through the empty space, taking it all in. The scuffed floors, the flickering overhead lights, the faint smell of grease and bleach. He stopped in front of a bulletin board near the back exit. Pinned to it were staff schedules, health inspection notes, a faded photo of the original oak and ember opening day. Smiling faces raised glasses hope. Daniel's chest ached. "What happened to us?" he whispered. He turned to leave, ready to head back to the hotel. Then he heard it. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Rhythmic, steady, metal on wood. Daniel's head snapped up. Someone was still here. He moved toward the sound, his heartbeat quickening. It was coming from the far corner of the kitchen, past the walk-in, near the prep station. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Daniel stepped around the corner and froze. A young woman stood alone under a single flickering fluorescent light, chopping vegetables with surgical precision. Her back was to him, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, white chef's coat stained and wrinkled. Her hands moved like clockwork, fast, clean, relentless. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. Daniel's breath caught. She didn't even know he was there. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound echoed in the empty kitchen, steady as a heartbeat, lonely as a prayer. And in that moment, standing in the cold, dim space, Daniel Whitaker realized something that made his stomach drop. This was the heartbeat of his restaurant, and it was breaking. Daniel stood frozen, watching the woman's hands move in the dim light. The knife rose and fell with mechanical precision. Carrots, celery, onions, each cut identical to the last. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He should leave. Come back tomorrow. But something kept him rooted to the spot. The woman paused, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. Her shoulders sagged for just a moment, then straightened again. She reached for another carrot. Daniel cleared his throat softly. She spun around, knife still in hand, eyes wide. "Jesus!" she gasped. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry," Daniel said, raising his hands. "I'm Mark. Maintenance. Didn't mean to. I thought everyone had gone home." She stared at him for a beat, chest rising and falling. Then she lowered the knife and turned back to her cutting board. "Yeah, well, someone's got to prep for morning shift." Daniel stepped closer, keeping his distance. "It's almost midnight." "I know what time it is." Her voice was flat, exhausted, not rude, just empty. Daniel glanced at the mountain of vegetables in front of her. Enough for 3 days' worth of service. "That's a lot of work for one person," he said carefully. "Tell me about it." She didn't look up. Thwack, thwack. "Why isn't anyone helping you?" Now she did look up. Her eyes, dark brown, ringed with shadow, met his. For a moment, he thought she might tell him to mind his own business. Instead, she laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You're new here, right?" "First day." "Then you'll learn." She went back to chopping. "Nobody helps anybody. That's not how this place works." Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced around the kitchen, really looked at it this time. The floor near the dish pit was slick with old grease. The exhaust hood above the grill was caked with carbon buildup. One of the burners had a visible crack. The walk-in door hung crooked on its hinges. "How long has that cooler been leaking?" he asked. "Month, maybe 2. She shrugged. "They keep saying they'll fix it. They never do." "And the burner?" 3 weeks. "Jesus." "Yeah." Her knife came down harder. "Welcome to Oak and Ember, Detroit, where everything's broken and nobody gives a shit." Daniel watched her work for another minute. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but there was no joy in them, no passion, just survival. "I'm going to take a look at that cooler," he said finally. "Knock yourself out." He walked to the walk-in, pulled open the door. Inside, the temperature gauge read 43 degrees. Should have been 38. Condensation dripped from the ceiling. Produce was stacked haphazardly, some of it already showing signs of rot. Daniel's stomach turned. He'd built this company on quality, on care, on respect for the ingredients, for the craft, for the people. What the hell had happened? He stepped back out, closing the door carefully. The woman was still chopping her back to him. "You know," Daniel said, "I used to work in kitchens. Long time ago." "Yeah." She didn't sound interested. "Yeah, and I remember this one chef I worked under. Guy was a bastard. Screamed at everyone, threw pans, made people cry." Thwack, thwack. "One day," Daniel continued, "a line cook asked him why he was so angry all the time. You know what he said?" The woman paused, didn't turn around, but she was listening. He said, "I'm not angry, I'm scared, because if I stop pushing, everything falls apart." Silence. "Then what happened to him?" "Heart attack at 52, dead before the ambulance arrived." The woman set down her knife. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. "That's a real uplifting story, Mark. Just saying. Fear's a shitty motivator." She turned around, then leaning against the counter. For the first time, Daniel got a good look at her face. Mid-20s maybe, pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, a small scar on her chin, pretty in a worn-down kind of way. "You meet Kurt yet?" she asked. "The head chef, yeah." "Then you know what we're dealing with." She crossed her arms. "He wasn't always like this. When he first started, he actually seemed like he cared, but the last 6 months..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "What changed?" "I don't know. Corporate kept pushing for faster service, lower costs, higher profits. Kurt started pushing us. We started breaking. And now..." She gestured at the empty kitchen. "Here we are." Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Corporate, that was him. He was the one who'd signed off on those directives. Efficiency targets, labor cost reductions, streamlined operations, all those bloodless corporate terms, and they'd bled real people dry. "Listen," the woman said, pushing off the counter. "I appreciate the chat, but I've got another hour of this before I can go home. So..." "Right. Yeah." Daniel nodded. "I'll get out of your way." He turned to leave, then stopped. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Aria." "Aria." He nodded. "I'm gonna fix that cooler tomorrow. And the burner. And whatever else is broken around here." "Sure you will." Her voice was flat again, disbelieving. "I will. Everyone says that." She picked up her knife. "Nobody ever does." Daniel left through the back door, stepping out into the cold Detroit night. The parking lot was empty except for an old Chevy with a dented bumper, Aria's, he assumed. He sat in his rental car for a long time staring at the restaurant. Inside, through the small kitchen window, he could see her silhouette still moving, still chopping, still surviving. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened his notes app, started typing, "Detroit Day 1. Observations. Equipment failures, walk-in cooler burner refrigeration unit. Head chef Kurt aggressive management style, fear-based motivation, staff morale non-existent. Communication minimal hostile. Late night prep worker Aria doing work of 3 people alone, no support." He paused, fingers hovering over the screen, then added, "Anonymous letter was right. Nobody sees them, including me." He hit save and started the car, but he didn't drive away. Not yet. Instead, he sat there in the darkness, watching that lone figure in the window, and made himself a promise he would see her. He would see all of them, and he would make this right, even if it meant tearing everything down to do it. Daniel returned the next night at 11:30 p.m. after the last employee had clocked out. He told himself it was to check the walk-in cooler he'd repaired earlier that day, to make sure the new seal was holding, to verify the temperature stabilized. But that was a lie. He wanted to see if she'd be there again. The kitchen was dark, except for the prep station in the back corner, and there she was, Aria, in the same stained chef's coat, chopping vegetables under the same flickering fluorescent light. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Daniel stood in the doorway watching. She moved like a machine, no wasted motion, no hesitation. But there was something different tonight. Her movements were slower, more deliberate, like every cut took effort she didn't have. He stepped into the kitchen. Aria's head snapped up. When she saw him, her shoulders dropped slightly. "You again." "Me again." Daniel walked closer, hands in his pockets. "Cooler's fixed, by the way. Holding at 38 degrees. "I noticed." She went back to chopping. "Thanks." "You're welcome." Silence. Just the rhythmic sound of the knife and the hum of the refrigeration unit. Daniel leaned against the counter across from her. "So, you do this every night?" "Most nights." "Why?" Aria's knife paused mid-stroke. She looked up at him, eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, why?" "I mean," Daniel said carefully, "it's almost midnight. You've been here since 5 this morning. That's 19 hours. Why are you still here? Because someone has to be. She set down the knife, wiping her hands on her apron. Morning shift starts at 6. If I don't prep now, they'll walk into chaos. Orders will back up. Kurt will lose his shit. Customers will complain. And corporate. She stopped herself, shaking her head. Corporate what? Nothing. Forget it. Daniel pushed off the counter, moving closer. No, tell me. Corporate what? Arya stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, that same bitter sound from last night. Corporate will send another email about efficiency and teamwork and the Oak and Ember family. She made air quotes with her fingers. Like we're all supposed to hold hands and sing songs while they cut our hours and ignore our maintenance requests. Daniel's chest tightened. Every word was a knife. So you stay, he said quietly, to keep things running. Yeah, that's dedication. No. Arya picked up the knife again. It's not dedication, Mark. It's necessity. She said the word like it tasted bitter. By necessity, Daniel repeated softly. By necessity. Arya started chopping again, harder now. There's a difference. Dedication is a choice. This is just what happens when you don't have options. Daniel watched her work in silence for a few minutes. The fluorescent light above her flickered, casting shadows across her face. That's when he noticed it. Taped to the side of the stainless steel shelf, half hidden behind a stack of cutting boards, a photograph. Daniel tilted his head, trying to see it better. It showed Arya and an older woman both smiling at the camera. They were standing in front of a lake, golden hour light making everything glow. The older woman had her arm around Arya's shoulders. Arya looked younger, maybe 20, 21. Her smile was real, unguarded. Below the photo, written in faded marker, Mom, the last bright day. Daniel's throat went tight. Arya caught him staring. Her expression shifted, something between defensive and vulnerable. What? She said. Nothing. Sorry. Daniel gestured at the photo. That your mom? Arya's jaw clenched. She looked at the photo, then quickly away. Yeah. You two close. We were. Her voice was flat. It's complicated. Daniel knew he should drop it, knew he was pushing into territory he had no right to enter. But something in her voice, something broken and raw, made him ask, what happened? Arya set down the knife. Her hands were shaking slightly. Nothing. Just old picture. That's all. Arya, it's late, Mark. She turned away from him, reaching for a new bundle of celery. I've got work to do. The dismissal was clear, but Daniel couldn't let it go. Not when he could see the tension in her shoulders. Not when he could hear the strain in her voice. The last bright day, he said softly, reading the caption again. That's a heavy thing to write. Arya's hands stilled. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then, barely audible, it was the last day before everything changed. How long ago? 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, 14 days. She said it like she'd been counting, like every day was carved into her bones. We were at Lake Erie. Just a stupid day trip. She wanted to see the sunset. Daniel waited, didn't push, just listened. Arya picked up the knife again, but didn't start chopping, just held it, staring at the blade. 2 days later, she got hit by a drunk driver on her way home from work. Car jumped the median, 60 miles an hour. She didn't have a chance. Jesus, Arya, I'm so sorry. Yeah, everyone's sorry. Her voice was hollow. Doesn't change anything. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to say something, anything that would make this better, but there was nothing. No words could fix this. She survive? He asked quietly. Arya let out a shaky breath. If you can call it that. She didn't elaborate, didn't explain, just went back to chopping faster now, like she was trying to outrun the conversation. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Daniel watched her for another moment, then made a decision. I'm gonna help you, he said. What? I'm gonna help you prep. 4 hands are faster than 2. Arya looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Your maintenance. I'm also someone who worked in kitchens for 15 years. I know how to use a knife. Daniel grabbed an apron from the hook and tied it around his waist. Show me what needs doing. Mark, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He picked up a knife and moved to the cutting board next to hers. Come on, what's next? Arya stared at him. For the first time since he'd met her, something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been surprise, or gratitude, or maybe just confusion that someone actually gave a damn. Onions, she said finally. 50 pounds. Then let's do it. They worked side by side in silence. Daniel's hands remembered the rhythm, the way the knife should feel the angle of the blade, the steady rock of the motion. It had been years, but muscle memory didn't forget. After about 10 minutes, Arya spoke. "You're good at this." "Told you. 15 years. Why'd you stop?" Daniel hesitated. "Got promoted, started managing instead of cooking, then managing the managers, then—" He trailed off. "Then I forgot what it felt like to actually make something with my own hands." Arya glanced at him. "You miss it?" "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "I really do." They kept working. The pile of onions slowly shrank. The fluorescent light continued its irregular flicker. The hum of the kitchen surrounded them, machines breathing metal, settling the world outside locked away. After another 20 minutes, Arya set down her knife and rolled her shoulders. "All right, that's enough for tonight." Daniel looked at the prep. They'd finished in half the time. "See?" he said. "Teamwork." Arya almost smiled. "Almost. Thanks, Mark." "Anytime." She started cleaning her station, wiping down the cutting board, organizing her knives. Daniel did the same. That's when he noticed her hands. Her fingers were raw, red and cracked, small cuts healing over old scars, nails chipped and stained. The hands of someone who worked too much, slept too little, never had time to heal. She caught him looking. "Occupational hazard," she said, flexing her fingers. "Comes with the territory. You should wear gloves." "Can't afford to lose the feeling. Need to know what I'm touching." She dried her hands on a towel. "It's fine. I'm used to it." "I'm used to it." 4 words that said everything. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. This woman, this young woman who should have been following her dreams, building her future, had been ground down into someone who was just used to it. Used to pain. Used to exhaustion. Used to being invisible. And he'd let it happen. Arya untied her apron and hung it up. She grabbed her jacket from a hook by the back door, a worn denim thing with a broken zipper. "You heading out?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, finally." "Where do you live?" Arya paused, hand on the door. Her expression shifted, guarded again. "Why?" "Just making conversation." "Dearborn Heights," she said after a moment. "About 20 minutes from here." "That's not bad." "It's fine." She pushed open the door. Cold air rushed in. "See you tomorrow, Mark." "See you tomorrow." She left. Daniel stood alone in the empty kitchen, staring at the photograph still taped to the shelf. Mom, the last bright day. A day at the lake. Sunset. Smiles. 2 days before everything shattered. Daniel pulled out his phone and took a picture of the photo, not to invade her privacy, but to remember, to hold on to this moment, to make sure he never forgot what he'd seen tonight. A young woman chopping vegetables at midnight, not because she wanted to, because she had to. By necessity. Daniel looked at the clock, 1:47 a.m. Then he made another decision. He walked to the back door, stepped out into the parking lot, and watched Arya's old Chevy pull out onto Michigan Avenue. And then, keeping his distance, he followed. Daniel kept 3 car lengths back his rental, blending into the sparse, late-night traffic on Michigan Avenue. He knew this was wrong. Knew he was crossing a line. But something in his gut told him there was more to Arya's story. Something that explained why a young woman with skill like hers was grinding herself to dust in a prep station at midnight. The Chevy's brake lights flared at a red light. Daniel slowed, watching. Through his windshield, he could see Arya's silhouette head tilted back against the headrest, eyes closed. Even from here, he could see the exhaustion in her posture. The light turned green. She drove on. They wound through Detroit's east side, past shuttered factories and convenience stores with barred windows. The neighborhoods got quieter, darker, row houses with chain-link fences and yards full of weeds. Finally, the Chevy turned onto a residential street in Dearborn Heights and pulled into the driveway of a small house with faded blue siding. Daniel drove past, then circled back and parked half a block away, engine off, lights off. He sat in the darkness, watching. Arya got out of her car slowly, like every movement hurt. She stood there for a moment, keys in hand, staring at the house. Then she squared her shoulders and walked to the front door. Daniel waited 5 minutes, 10. Then, against every instinct telling him to leave, he got out of the car and walked closer. The street was silent. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A streetlight flickered overhead. Daniel stopped at the edge of Arya's property, partially hidden by an overgrown hedge. From here, he could see through the front window, curtains half-drawn, lights on inside. What he saw made his breath catch. The living room had been converted into a medical space. A hospital bed sat where a couch should have been. Surrounded by equipment IV stands a heart monitor, oxygen tanks. The walls were still painted, a cheerful yellow family photos still hanging, but everything else screamed caregiver's home. And in the bed, propped up by pillows, was the woman from the photograph. Arya's mother, but she looked nothing like the smiling woman at the lake. She was thin, painfully thin, her face gaunt, her skin pale. A rigid neck brace held her head in place. Her arms lay motionless at her sides, one hand curled inward at an unnatural angle. Daniel's throat closed. Arya moved into view, setting down her bag. She was talking. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he could see the gentleness in her movements. As she adjusted her mother's pillows, checked the IV line, smoothed the blanket. Her mother's eyes followed her, alert, aware, trapped in a body that wouldn't respond. Arya disappeared from view, then returned with a small bowl and spoon. She sat on the edge of the bed and began spooning what looked like soup into her mother's mouth, small bites, patient, waiting between each one. Her mother could barely swallow. It took minutes for each spoonful. Arya didn't rush, didn't show frustration, just kept going, talking the whole time, making her mother smile or try to the muscles in her face, only half cooperating. After the soup, Arya wiped her mother's face with a damp cloth, then carefully removed the neck brace to massage the woman's neck and shoulders. Her mother's eyes closed, a flicker of relief crossing her features. Daniel stood frozen, watching this intimate moment he had no right to witness, but he couldn't look away. Arya worked for another hour, changing bandages, administering medication, adjusting the bed's position. Every movement was practiced efficient. She'd done this 1,000 times. This was her routine. Work until midnight at Oak and Ember Drive home, take care of her mother until she fell asleep, maybe grab an hour or two of rest herself, then back to the restaurant before dawn. Every day, by necessity. Finally, Arya turned off most of the lights, leaving only a small lamp on the side table. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, resting her head on the mattress beside her mother's hand. Her mother's fingers twitched, barely trying to reach her daughter's hair. Arya lifted her head, caught the gesture, and pressed her mother's hand against her cheek. Daniel saw her shoulders shake. She was crying. Silent, exhausted tears that she'd probably been holding back for 3 years, 2 months and 14 days. Daniel stepped back from the window, his own eyes burning. He'd seen enough, more than enough. He walked back to his car on shaking legs and sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Jesus fucking Christ." This was why Arya worked 3 jobs before settling on night shifts at Oak and Ember. This was why she lived on 2 hours of sleep. This was why she chopped vegetables at midnight with raw, bleeding hands. Not for herself. For the woman in that bed who couldn't move, couldn't speak properly, couldn't live without full-time care. Daniel pulled out his phone with trembling hands and called Marcus. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" Marcus groaned. "I need you to pull an employee file. Right now." "Daniel." "Right now, Marcus." A pause, then rustling. Okay. Give me a name." "Arya Thompson. Detroit location. I need everything: hire date, employment history, emergency contacts, insurance claims. Everything." "This is about that undercover thing, isn't it? Just do it. Please. Give me 20 minutes. Daniel sat in his car staring at Arya's house until his phone buzzed. Marcus had sent a PDF. Daniel opened it, scrolling through the pages, and felt his stomach drop with every line. Arya Thompson, age 25, hired March 2023, 2 years, 8 months ago, previous employment, 3 concurrent part-time positions, emergency contact, Margaret Thompson, mother, unavailable. Then the note section: insurance claim filed October 2022. Margaret Thompson, catastrophic injury driver, at fault, uninsured. Patient requires 24/7 care. Initial coverage approved, long-term care denied. Treatment deemed non-essential for recovery. Daniel's vision blurred with rage. Non-essential. A woman was paralyzed from the neck down, and some insurance company had decided her ongoing care was non-essential. He scrolled further. Father Robert Thompson, no contact since 2023. No child support. No financial assistance. Educational background: full scholarship to Culinary Institute of New York acceptance letter dated August 2022. Deferred. Status withdrawn. Daniel stopped breathing. She'd had a full scholarship to one of the best culinary schools in the country, and she'd given it up. Daniel looked back at the house. The lights were off now, except for the small lamp by the bed. Aria was probably trying to sleep in that chair, knowing she had to be back at the restaurant in 4 hours. He opened the photos on his phone and stared at the picture he'd taken the photograph taped to the shelf. Mom, the last bright day. Now he understood. The last day before her mother's accident. The last day Aria's life belonged to herself. The last day before every dream, every plan, every hope got put on hold indefinitely. She didn't choose this. She didn't choose to work herself to death in a kitchen that didn't appreciate her. She didn't choose to give up culinary school. She didn't choose any of it. By necessity. Daniel's hands tightened on the phone until his knuckles turned white. He'd built his empire on the promise of authentic American food from the heart. He'd told himself he cared about people, about families, about doing right by his employees. But somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring everything in numbers, efficiency metrics, labor costs, profit margins, and those numbers had hidden the truth. That real people were being crushed by his system, that a young woman with more talent and dedication than most of his head chefs was working midnight shifts just to keep her mother alive, that she was eating leftover food from the kitchen because she couldn't afford groceries, that she was sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night because there was no one else to help her. And he, sitting in his glass tower 14 floors above reality, had never even known her name. Daniel sat in that car until the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Then he started the engine and drove back to his hotel. But he didn't sleep. He sat at the desk, opened his laptop, and started making calls. First to Marcus. I need a full benefits review, every employee in the Detroit location. Cross-reference with insurance claims, family situations, medical histories. I want to know who's struggling. Then to his head of HR, find me the best home healthcare agencies in Detroit. I don't care what it costs. I need nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, full-time care. Then to his legal team, can we fight an insurance denial, catastrophic injury case, long-term care deemed non-essential? What are our options? Then to the Dean of Admissions at the Culinary Institute of New York. I need to know if a deferred scholarship can be reinstated. Student name, Aria Thompson. Yes, I know it's 6 in the morning. This is important. By the time the sun rose over Detroit, Daniel had made 17 calls. And he was just getting started because he'd seen the truth now. And there was no going back. Daniel didn't go back to the restaurant that day. Instead, he sat in his hotel room laptop, open phone pressed to his ear. Marcus, I need everything on Aria Thompson. Employment history, insurance claims, family situation, everything. Daniel, it's 6 in the morning. I don't care what time it is. I need it now. An hour later, Marcus called back. You sitting down? Marcus asked. Just tell me. Marcus's voice was tight. Her mother was hit by a drunk driver 3 years ago. Head-on collision. The guy's BAC was .19. Daniel's jaw clenched. Injuries. Spinal fracture C4-C5. Complete paralysis below the neck. Marcus paused. She survived, but she needs round-the-clock care. Feeding tube oxygen, physical therapy, the works. Insurance? That's where it gets worse. Marcus's voice dropped. They covered the initial hospitalization and 6 months of rehab. Then they cut her off. Said further treatment wasn't medically necessary. Daniel's fist slammed onto the desk. She's paralyzed, and they said treatment isn't necessary. That's what the claim denial says. Jesus Christ. Daniel stood up pacing. What about the father? Robert Thompson, left 6 months after the accident, no contact since, no child support, nothing. Daniel's vision blurred with rage. So Aria's been doing this alone. For 3 years. Marcus hesitated. Daniel, there's more. She had a full scholarship to the Culinary Institute of New York. Full ride, tuition room board, everything. She was supposed to start 2 weeks after her mother's accident. Daniel stopped pacing. What happened? She deferred, then withdrew completely. Marcus's voice softened. She gave up culinary school to take care of her mom. The air left Daniel's lungs. How much debt is she carrying? He asked quietly. Papers rustled on the other end. Medical bills, credit cards, payday loans. Totals around $143,000. And her income from us. $2,100 a month. She's classified as part-time, so no benefits. Daniel felt sick. She's short over $1,000 every month. Yeah, and based on her bank records, she's been covering the gap with high-interest loans and maxed-out credit cards. Marcus paused. Daniel, she's drowning. She's been drowning for years. Daniel sat back down heavily. His hands were shaking. What about her work history, he asked. Before Oak and Ember, she juggled 3 part-time jobs, diner, catering company, grocery store, all minimum wage. She took the night shift with us because it paid 50 cents more per hour and let her be home during the day with her mother. The county doesn't provide care. 4 hours a week, that's it. 4 hours. Out of 168 hours in a week, Arya got 4 hours of help. The rest was all on her. Send me everything, Daniel said. Every document, every record. What are you planning? Daniel looked out the window at Detroit's skyline, the city beginning to wake up. I'm planning to fix what I should have seen 3 years ago. 20 minutes later, Daniel's email pinged. He opened the attachments Marcus sent and started reading. The insurance denial letter made his blood boil. Patient has reached maximum medical improvement. Continued nursing care not medically necessary. Margaret Thompson couldn't feed herself, couldn't move, couldn't breathe without assistance, and some insurance adjuster had decided she didn't need help. Daniel kept reading. Arya's loan documents showed interest rates that should have been illegal. 340% APR on a payday loan. 3 credit cards maxed at their $5,000 limits. Collection notices for overdue medical bills. Every page was another knife in his chest. Then he found it, the scholarship letter from the Culinary Institute. Dear Miss Thompson, we are pleased to offer you a full merit scholarship. And below it, in Arya's handwriting, dated 2 weeks after her mother's accident, thank you for this incredible opportunity. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen family circumstances, I must respectfully defer my enrollment. I hope to reapply when my situation allows. She'd been so close, so goddamn close to her dream, and it had all been ripped away by a drunk driver and a system that didn't give a damn. Daniel opened a new document and started typing his fingers, moving fast and angry. Immediate action required. Arya Thompson. He didn't stop until he'd outlined everything: full medical coverage for Margaret's salary increase and reclassification for Arya, online culinary courses, home modifications, legal support for the insurance appeal. He calculated the cost. Nearly $200,000 for one employee. The board would lose their minds. His CFO would probably quit. The shareholders would demand explanations. Daniel didn't care. He hit send on the email to Marcus, then immediately called him. Did you get it? Daniel asked. Yeah, I'm reading it now. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Daniel, this is a lot. I know. The board. I don't care about the board. The budget implications? Marcus. Daniel's voice was steel. I built this company by telling myself I cared about people, that we were different, that we valued our employees. He paused. I was wrong. We weren't different. We were just better at hiding how little we actually gave a damn. That's not fair, isn't it? Daniel interrupted. We had an employee working 3 jobs before she came to us. We knew she was part-time, so we didn't have to give her benefits. We paid her minimum wage to do the work of 3 people. And when her mother's insurance got denied, when she was drowning in debt, when she was literally bleeding on our kitchen floor, where were we? Silence. We were looking at spreadsheets, Daniel said quietly, celebrating cost savings, patting ourselves on the back for keeping labor expenses down. So what do you want me to do? Marcus asked. Everything on that list, today. I don't care what it takes or what it costs. Make it happen. The paperwork alone will take days. Then work fast. Daniel stood up. I'm going back to the restaurant. I want everything ready by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? That's impossible. Figure it out, Marcus, because I'm done letting this company crush people while I pretend we're doing good. He hung up before Marcus could argue. Daniel stared at his phone for a long moment, then opened his photos. The picture he'd taken last night, the photograph taped to Arya's prep station. Mom, the last bright day. 2 women smiling at a lake, completely unaware that in 48 hours their entire world would shatter. Daniel thought about his own father, the line cook who'd worked himself to death because he believed in honest work and honest food, who'd told Daniel that a restaurant dies when the boss stops caring about the people. I stopped caring, Dad, Daniel whispered to the empty room. I didn't mean to, but I did. He looked at the photo again. But I'm going to fix it. I swear to God I'm going to fix it. His phone rang. Marcus again. I've got preliminary numbers, Marcus said. Between the medical coverage, salary adjustment, education costs, and home modifications, we're looking at about $190,000 for the first year. Do it. Daniel, I have to ask, what if other employees find out? What if they want the same treatment? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then Then maybe we should be asking ourselves why we haven't been treating all of them this way from the beginning. Marcus exhaled slowly. You know, this changes everything, right? The whole company structure, the budget model, the way we operate. Good, Daniel said, because the way we've been operating is broken. And it took a 25-year-old woman chopping vegetables at midnight to show me that. All right. Marcus's voice shifted, resigned but determined. I'll make the calls. But Daniel, yeah, the board meeting next month is going to be brutal. Let it be brutal. Daniel looked out at the city again, at the sun climbing higher. I'd rather face an angry board than look at myself in the mirror and see someone who let Aria Thompson drown while I counted profits. He hung up and sat down at the desk one more time. He pulled up Aria's employee photo, a standard headshot from her hire date 2 years ago. She looked younger, hopeful, like she still believed things might get better. Daniel wondered how long that hope had lasted. A month, too. How long before the midnight shifts and the mounting debt and the sheer impossibility of it all had ground that hope into dust. He closed the laptop and grabbed his jacket. Time to go back to the restaurant. Time to face what he'd let happen in his own house. And time to make damn sure it never happened again. Daniel arrived at Oak and Ember, Detroit at 4:30 p.m. just as the dinner prep was ramping up. The kitchen was already chaos, Kurt barking orders, line cooks scrambling tickets piling up on the expo station. And there in the back, prepping vegetables like always, was Aria. She looked worse than yesterday. Dark circles deeper, hands moving slower, a slight tremor in her fingers. Daniel busied himself checking the walk-in temperature, the burners, the dish pit, anything to stay close without being obvious. That's when he overheard Kurt on his cell phone near the office. Yeah, I got the email, Kurt was saying. Night shift cut effective immediately. Corporate says it's a cost-saving measure. Daniel's blood ran cold. He stepped closer, pretending to inspect a pipe. I don't care what their reasoning is, Kurt continued. I'll make it work. Aria can just prep faster during the day. If she can't handle it, we'll find someone who can. Daniel's fists clenched. That order had come from headquarters, from his finance team, from a directive he'd probably signed off on months ago without thinking about what it actually meant. Cost-saving measure. Translation, cut the hours of the person keeping this place running so the spreadsheet looks better. Kurt hung up and walked back into the kitchen. Aria, he shouted. Got news from corporate. Night shifts are done. Your day shift only now, starting tomorrow. Aria's knife stilled mid-chop. She turned slowly, face pale. What? You heard me. Day shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., no more overnight prep. But, Aria's voice was tight. Who's going to do the prep for morning service? Kurt shrugged. You'll do it during your shift, before the rush. That's impossible. There's not enough time. Then work faster. Kurt crossed his arms. Look, I don't make the rules. Corporate wants to cut costs, we cut costs. You don't like it, there's the door. Aria stared at him. Daniel could see her mind racing, calculating. Day shift meant she couldn't be home with her mother during the day, couldn't be there when the physical therapist came, couldn't feed her lunch, couldn't. I need the night shift, Aria said, her voice cracking. Please, I can't do days. Not my problem. Kurt, please. Are you deaf? Kurt's face reddened. The decision's made. Day shift or no shift. Your choice. Aria's hands were shaking now. I can't. Then quit. Kurt turned away. I've got 50 applicants who'd love your job. Daniel watched Aria's face crumble. She turned back to her cutting board, picked up the knife, and started chopping again. But her hands were trembling so badly the cuts were uneven. Dangerous. Aria, one of the line cooks said softly, maybe you should take a break. I'm fine. You don't look. I said I'm fine. She bore down on the knife, cutting faster, harder, like she was trying to outrun the panic rising in her chest. Daniel started moving toward her. That's when it happened. The knife slipped. Aria gasped a sharp, wounded sound and jerked her hand back. Blood welled up across her palm, dark and fast. Shit, she whispered, then louder, shit. The knife clattered to the floor. Aria pressed her other hand against the wound, but blood seeped through her fingers, dripping onto the cutting board, the counter, the floor. She swayed. Aria! The line cook stepped forward. You okay? I'm fine, Her knees buckled. Daniel lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Whoa, I got you, he said, lowering her carefully to sit on the floor. Aria's face was white, her breathing shallow. Blood ran down her wrist, staining her chef's coat. Let me see, Daniel said, gently pulling her hand away from the wound. The cut was deep. Not life-threatening, but bad. She needed stitches. "Someone get the first aid kit," Daniel shouted. Kurt appeared, looking annoyed. "What the hell happened?" "She's hurt," Daniel snapped. "Where's your first aid kit?" "Office, but—" "Get it, now." Something in Daniel's voice made Kurt move. Daniel wrapped Arya's hand in clean towels from the dish station, applying pressure. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I can't lose this job. I can't." "Shh, you're not losing anything." Daniel kept his voice calm, even though rage was boiling in his chest. "Just breathe, okay, breathe." "I can't do day shift," Arya sobbed. "I can't leave her alone. She needs me. If I'm not there—" "I know," Daniel said quietly. "I know." Kurt returned with the kit. Daniel grabbed gauze and started wrapping Arya's hand properly. "She needs to go to urgent care," Daniel said. "That needs stitches." "I can't afford urgent care," Arya said, her voice breaking. "I can't." "I'll take you," Daniel said firmly. "And don't worry about the cost." Arya looked up at him, eyes red and desperate. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Because I watched you take care of your mother at 2 in the morning. Because I know you gave up your dream to keep her alive. Because my company has been bleeding you dry, and I didn't see it until it was almost too late. Because someone should," he said instead. Kurt crossed his arms. "If she leaves now, she's done for the day. I can't have people walking off shift." Daniel stood slowly still, holding Arya's injured hand. He looked Kurt dead in the eye. "She's bleeding through a towel. She's going to urgent care. And if you have a problem with that, take it up with me." Kurt blinked, surprised by the edge in Daniel's voice. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Daniel almost told him. Almost ripped off the mask right there. But not yet. Not like this. "I'm someone who gives a damn," Daniel said coldly, "which is more than I can say for you." He helped Arya to her feet. She was still crying, still shaking, but she let him guide her toward the back door. As they passed the prep station, Daniel saw it, the photograph still taped to the shelf. Mom. The last bright day. He looked at Arya, at her blood-soaked hand, at her exhausted, terrified face, and made his decision. Tomorrow, he was going to fix this. Tonight, he was going to make sure she survived. The urgent care doctor put 7 stitches in Arya's hand and prescribed antibiotics and rest. Daniel paid the $340 bill without blinking. Arya tried to protest, "I'll pay you back, I swear." But Daniel just shook his head. "Don't worry about it." He drove her home. She was quiet the whole way, staring out the window, her bandaged hand resting in her lap. When they pulled up to her house, she didn't move. "I'm going to lose my job," she said flatly. "No, you're not. You didn't see Kurt's face. He's been looking for a reason to fire me for months." She laughed bitterly. "And I just gave him one." "Arya. And even if he doesn't fire me, I can't do day shift. I can't." Her voice broke. "My mom needs me. She can't be alone all day. The county only provides 4 hours of in-home care a week." 4 hours. That's nothing. Daniel's chest ached. "What if I told you," he said carefully, "that things are going to change?" Arya turned to look at him, eyes red. "What do you mean?" "I mean, trust me." "Okay, just trust me." "Why should I trust you? You're a maintenance guy who's been here 3 days." "Fair point." "Because Daniel said, I see you, and I'm not going to let you fall." Arya stared at him for a long moment. Then she opened the car door. "Thanks for the ride, Mark, and for everything." She got out and walked to her house without looking back. Daniel watched her go inside, then pulled out his phone. "Marcus, it's time. Set up the meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. conference room at Detroit location." "You sure about this?" "Absolutely." The next morning, Arya received a text from an unknown number. "Please report to the conference room at Oak and Ember, Detroit at 9:00 a.m. This is regarding your employment status." Arya's stomach dropped. This was it. She was being fired. She hadn't slept. Her hand throbbed despite the painkillers. She'd spent the night crying into her mother's blankets, while her mother watched helplessly, unable to comfort her. At 8:55 a.m., Arya walked into Oak and Ember, hand-bandaged, eyes swollen, wearing her only clean shirt. Kurt was standing outside the conference room, looking smug. "Conference room," he said, jerking his thumb. "They're waiting." "Who's they?" "You'll see." Arya's hand started shaking again. She pushed open the door. Inside the conference room table was empty, except for a laptop set up with a camera, the red recording light blinking. And standing by the window back to her was Mark, the maintenance guy. "Mark," Arya said, confused. "What are you doing here?" He turned around slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, he wasn't wearing a baseball cap. Arya's breath caught. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "and I need you to hear me out before you react." "Okay." Daniel took a step forward, hands loose at his sides. "My name isn't Mark. It's Daniel. Daniel Whitaker." Arya's brow furrowed. I'm the CEO of Oak and Ember." The room tilted. Arya's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. "I came here undercover 3 days ago." Daniel continued, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Because I got an anonymous letter saying my employees felt invisible. I wanted to see the truth for myself." Arya took a step back, shaking her head. No, you're lying." "I'm not. You followed me. Her voice rose sharp and furious. "You watched me in my house. You saw my mother." "Yes." "What gives you the right?" Arya's scream echoed off the walls. "You spied on me. You let me talk to you. You helped me prep you. Jesus Christ. You saw her." Her voice broke. Tears poured down her face. "You had no right. You had no fucking right." "You're absolutely correct," Daniel said, and his voice cracked too. "I violated your privacy. I crossed a line I had no business crossing, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry." "Sorry?" Arya laughed, a raw, painful sound. "You think sorry fixes this?" "No." Daniel swallowed hard. "No, it doesn't. But I'm going to try anyway." He walked to the laptop and turned the screen toward her. On it was a document. Arya's vision was too blurred with tears to read it, but Daniel read it aloud. "Effective immediately, Oak and Ember will cover 100% of your mother's care costs for the next 12 months. That includes 24/7 nursing care, physical therapy 3 times a week, occupational therapy twice a week, all equipment, all medications." Arya's knees went weak. She grabbed the back of a chair. "You're being reclassified as assistant kitchen director, full-time, $52,000 a year, full benefits, flexible schedule so you can be with your mother when you need to be." I don't understand. Johnson & Wales University has agreed to let you take online culinary courses fully paid by Oak and Ember. You'll earn your degree while you work." Arya's hand flew to her mouth. "We're also providing a $15,000 grant for home modifications, wheelchair ramps, a lift system, whatever your mother needs." "Stop," Arya whispered. "Please stop." But Daniel kept going. "And our legal team is fighting your mother's insurance denial. We're going to make them pay what they should have paid 3 years ago." Arya collapsed into the chair, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Daniel knelt in front of her, not touching, just close. "I did this because I saw you," he said, his own voice breaking. "I saw you chopping vegetables at midnight. I saw you sleeping in a chair next to your mother. I saw you give up everything, your dreams, your future yourself, just to keep her alive." He paused, wiping his own eyes. "And I realized that my company, my system, was one of the things crushing you. So I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Arya looked up at him, face streaked with tears. "Am I doing this because of the camera?" Daniel gestured at the laptop. "Or am I doing this because I actually see you?" Arya's breath hitched. She stared at him, at this man who'd lied to her, who'd invaded her privacy, who'd seen her at her most vulnerable, but who'd also knelt beside her when she was bleeding, who'd driven her to urgent care and paid the bill, who'd chopped onions with her at midnight without being asked, who'd looked at her like she mattered. "Recognition," she whispered, "not charity." Daniel nodded, tears running down his face. "Recognition, not charity." Arya stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. "I'm still angry at you," she said. "You should be. I might be angry for a long time. I understand. But," her voice broke, "but I also haven't been able to sleep in 3 years. And you're telling me I can sleep now." "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "You can sleep now." Arya covered her face with her hands and cried deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside her for years. Daniel stood and hesitantly opened his arms. Arya crashed into him, and he held her while she fell apart. "Thank you," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You're welcome," Daniel whispered. "And I'm sorry for all of it." They stood there for a long time, two strangers bound by broken systems and second chances. When Arya finally pulled back, Daniel handed her a tissue. "There's one more thing," he said. "I don't think I can handle one more thing." "This one's easy." He smiled. "Take the rest of the week off. Paid. Your mom's first nurse starts tomorrow morning at 8. Arya laughed through her tears. "I don't even know what I'd do with time off." Sleep, Daniel said. You're going to sleep. 1 month later, Arya stood in her kitchen, her actual kitchen, not the oak and ember one, and stared at the ingredients spread across the counter. Butter, flour, cinnamon, apples. She hadn't cooked for pleasure in 3 years. Cooking had been survival, necessity, a means to a paycheck that kept the lights on and the medical supplies stocked. But today, her mother was resting comfortably in the living room with Nurse Patricia, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been coming every weekday for the past month. Today, Arya had 3 hours to herself, and she wanted to bake. She tied on an apron, a new one not stained with grease or blood, and started measuring flour. Her hands remembered the rhythm, the way dough should feel, the satisfaction of something coming together under your fingers. From the living room, she heard her mother laugh, actually laugh at something Patricia said. Arya's throat tightened. That sound. She'd almost forgotten what her mother's laugh sounded like. The apple pie went into the oven. Arya set a timer, then walked into the living room. Her mother was sitting in her motorized wheelchair, new courtesy of the Oak and Ember grant, positioned by the window. Sunlight streamed in, making everything glow. Patricia was reading aloud from a novel. Her mother's eyes were bright, alert, present in a way Arya hadn't seen in months. "Hey, Mom," Arya said softly. Her mother's face lit up. She made a sound, not quite words, but close. Her speech was coming back slowly with the therapy. "Smells good," Patricia said, smiling. "What are you making?" "Apple pie, Mom's favorite." Her mother's eyes welled up. She reached out her hand, still weak, still trembling, but reaching, and Arya took it. "I love you," Arya said. Her mother squeezed back. Just a little, but enough. That evening, after Patricia left and Arya's mother was settled in for the night, Arya sat at the small kitchen table with a slice of pie and her laptop. She opened her email. Subject: Welcome to Johnson & Wales online culinary program. Her first class started next week. Introduction to Culinary Arts Theory. She'd be doing the coursework at night after her mother was asleep, but on a schedule she controlled. No more midnight prep shifts. No more choosing between sleep and survival. Just learning, growing, becoming the chef she'd always dreamed of being. Arya clicked on the course syllabus and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. 2 weeks later, Daniel visited. He knocked on the door at 2:00 p.m. on a Saturday. Arya opened it looking healthier than he'd ever seen her, color in her cheeks, light in her eyes. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, smiling. "Daniel, please." "Daniel?" She stepped aside. "Come in." The house had changed. A ramp led to the front door. Inside the living room was brighter new curtains, fresh paint, medical equipment organized neatly instead of cluttering every surface. And in the center of it all, in her wheelchair by the window, was Margaret. She looked up when Daniel entered and smiled. "Mom, this is Daniel," Arya said. "My boss, the one I told you about." Margaret extended her hand slowly. Daniel took it gently. "It's an honor to meet you," he said. Margaret's mouth worked trying to form words. Finally, "Thank you." Her voice was slurred thick, but there. Daniel felt his eyes burn. "You're welcome." Arya made tea and they sat in the living room while Margaret dozed in her chair, the afternoon light warm on her face. "She's doing better," Arya said softly. "The therapy is helping. She's talking more, moving her fingers. Little things, but they're not little," Daniel said. "No." Arya smiled. "They're not." She stirred her tea, thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that day in the conference room, when you told me who you really were. And I'm still mad at you for lying." "Fair. But I understand why you did it." Arya looked at him. "You couldn't see the truth from where you were, so you came down to where we were." Daniel nodded. "I spent 23 years building something I thought mattered, and then I realized I'd lost sight of the people who made it matter." "You're fixing it, though." "Trying to." Daniel set down his cup. "I've started visiting all the locations, talking to staff, really listening. We've changed policies, better healthcare, mental health support equipment upgrades, profit sharing." "That's good." "It's a start." He paused. "But it doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give back the years people like you lost." Arya reached across the table and put her hand on his. "No," she said, "but it gives us our future back. And that's not nothing." Before Daniel left, Arya walked him to the door. "Oh," she said, pulling something from her pocket. "I wanted to show you this." It was a photograph new printed that morning. It showed Arya and her mother on the front porch, both smiling. Margaret in her wheelchair, Arya kneeling beside her, arms around each other. At the bottom, in Arya's handwriting, "Mom first, bright day again." Daniel stared at the photo, his vision blurring. "Keep it," Arya said. "So you remember why you do this." Daniel took the photograph carefully like it was made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. "No." Arya set her own eyes bright. "Thank you." The new Oak and Ember location in Ann Arbor was 3 times the size of the Detroit restaurant, with floor-to-ceiling windows, an open kitchen concept, and a wood-fired grill centerpiece. But the real centerpiece was standing at the front door in a crisp black chef's coat embroidered with gold thread. Chef Arya Thompson, assistant kitchen director. She looked different, not just healthier, though she'd gained weight. Her skin glowed, her hair shone. It was the way she carried herself, shoulders back, head high, eyes bright with something that looked like joy. The parking lot was packed. Press, investors, local politicians, and staff from every Oak and Ember location brought in for the grand opening. Daniel stood off to the side, watching as guests filtered in. Marcus appeared beside him. "You ready for this?" Should be asking Arya that, not me. "She looks ready." "She is." The crowd began to gather near the entrance. Daniel checked his watch. Time. He walked to the front where a ribbon stretched across the doorway. Arya stood beside it, holding oversized scissors. Beside her, in a motorized wheelchair decorated with flowers, was Margaret. She'd insisted on coming, wouldn't take no for an answer. Patricia the nurse stood nearby, watchful but smiling. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "6 months ago, I learned something that changed everything I thought I knew about running a company." The crowd quieted. "I learned that you can have the best recipes, the best locations, the best marketing, but if you don't see your people, you don't have anything." He glanced at Arya. "This woman right here taught me that. She taught me what it means to work by necessity instead of passion. She taught me what we lose when we value profit over people. And she taught me that recognition, real recognition, is the most powerful thing you can give someone." Arya's eyes shimmered. "So this restaurant isn't just a new location, it's a second chance. For me, for Oak and Ember, for everyone who's ever felt invisible." Daniel stepped back and gestured to Arya. "Chef Thompson, would you do the honors?" Arya looked at him surprised. "Me? You? This is your moment." Arya glanced at her mother. Margaret nodded, beaming. Arya stepped forward, scissors in hand, and faced the crowd. She started, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm not great at speeches, but I want to say something." She took a breath. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never cook for joy again. I thought I'd never have a future beyond survival." Her voice grew stronger. "And then someone saw me, really saw me, not as a number or a labor cost, as a person." She looked at Daniel. "This restaurant isn't just bricks and mortar. It's proof that second chances exist, that people matter more than profit, that when you invest in people, you get back something you can't measure on a spreadsheet." She turned back to the ribbon. "This is for everyone who's ever felt invisible, who's ever worked midnight shifts just to survive, who's ever had to choose between their dreams and the people they love." She raised the scissors. "You're seen. You matter. And you deserve a second chance, too." She cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause. People poured into the restaurant. The kitchen staff started service, beautiful plates of food cooked with precision and care. And the dining room filled with laughter and conversation. Daniel found Arya in the kitchen an hour later, directing her team with calm confidence. "How's it feel?" he asked. Arya grinned. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "You are." She plated a dish, seared salmon with roasted vegetables and herb butter, and handed it to Daniel. "Try this. New recipe." Daniel took a bite. Flavors exploded on his tongue, perfectly balanced, beautifully executed. "That's incredible." "I know." Arya winked. "I'm pretty good at this." Daniel laughed. "Yeah, you really are." At the end of the night, after the last guest left and the kitchen was clean, Arya wheeled her mother out to the parking lot. Daniel walked with them. The sky was clear stars, bright overhead, the kind of night that felt like new beginnings. Margaret looked up at Arya and said slowly, but clearly, "Proud of you." Arya knelt beside the wheelchair, taking her mother's hands. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. You're the reason I never gave up." Margaret smiled, then looked at Daniel. "Thank you." "No, ma'am," Daniel said, his voice thick. "Thank you for raising someone this extraordinary." As they drove away, Daniel stood in the empty parking lot, watching their taillights disappear. Marcus appeared beside him again. "That was quite a night." "Yeah. You know the board is going to grill you about the budget." "Let them. And the shareholders are going to ask questions about the Thompson case." "I'll have answers." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Daniel looked at him. You do? Yeah, Marcus smiled. Your father would be proud. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought about his dad, the line cook, who'd worked 40 years, who'd believed in honest food and honest work, who'd told him that a restaurant dies when the boss stops tasting the food. I hope so, Daniel said. They stood there for a while in the quiet night under the stars. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he'd finally gotten it right. 1 year later, Daniel's rental car pulled into the Oak and Ember Detroit parking lot at 3:47 a.m. He'd been in Chicago for a board meeting, drove straight through the night, and found himself here, drawn back to where it all began. The restaurant was dark, closed, silent. Daniel got out of the car, hands in his pockets, and walked to the front door. Through the windows, he could see the empty dining room tables set for tomorrow's service. He walked around to the back to the kitchen entrance and heard it. Thwack, thwack, thwack. His heart jumped. But this time it wasn't lonely, wasn't desperate. This time it was accompanied by voices, laughter, music playing softly from someone's phone. Daniel peered through the kitchen window. Inside, under bright, steady lights, no more flickering fluorescence, a full team was prepping for the morning. And leading them, demonstrating proper knife technique to two young cooks, was Aria. She looked radiant. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her chef's coat was crisp and clean. Her movements were confident, graceful. And she was smiling. Actually smiling. See, she was saying to one of the young cooks, you're rushing. Don't cut fast. Cut with your heart. Feel the knife. Feel the vegetable. Let the rhythm guide you. The young cook tried again, slower this time. Better, Aria said. Much better. That's how you make food that matters. Daniel watched transfixed. One of the other cooks, a kid maybe 19, said, Chef Aria, why do you come in so early? You don't have to anymore. Aria paused, considering. Because, she said finally, someone once taught me that the kitchen at 4 a.m. can be a lonely place. Or it can be a place where people take care of each other. I want it to be the second thing. She looked around at her team. You're not just here to prep vegetables. You're here to learn, to grow, to become the best chefs you can be. And I'm here to make sure you know you matter. The young cook blinked, eyes shining. Thank you, chef. Don't thank me. Just pass it forward. Daniel felt tears on his face. This was what he'd been searching for. Not the profit margins, not the expansion plans, not the awards or the press coverage. This, a kitchen full of people who felt seen, who felt valued, who were learning and growing and becoming something more than they'd been yesterday. This was the heartbeat he'd lost, and Aria had helped him find it again. Daniel knocked softly on the kitchen door. Aria looked up surprised. Then she smiled and walked over, opening the door. Daniel, what are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood, he said, smiling through tears. At 4 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Aria studied his face, then nodded. Come in. He stepped into the warm kitchen. The team looked up curious. Everyone, this is Daniel Whitaker, our CEO. A ripple of recognition, nervous smiles. Don't mind me, Daniel said. Just wanted to see how things were running. Want to help? Aria held out a knife. We've got 50 pounds of onions that need chopping. Daniel laughed. You remember? Of course I remember. He took the knife tied on an apron and stepped up to a cutting board beside her. Side by side they worked. Thwack, thwack, thwack. But this time the sound wasn't lonely. It was a symphony. As dawn broke over Detroit, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows. The prep was done. The team was ready. The restaurant would open in 2 hours, and everything was perfect. Aria and Daniel stood by the back door, watching the sunrise. You know, Aria said, a year ago I was standing in this exact spot chopping vegetables alone in the dark, wondering if I'd survive another day. And now I'm teaching others how to survive. She smiled. How to do more than survive. How to thrive. Daniel looked at her. You've come so far. We both have. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gray to gold to brilliant blue. Thank you, Daniel said finally, for not giving up, even when you had every reason to. Thank you, Aria replied, for seeing me, for reminding me that I'm more than just a body filling a shift. You always were. I know that now. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Board, meeting in 3 hours. Need you back in Ann Arbor. Daniel sighed. I have to go. I know. But I'll be back. I'm visiting all the locations this quarter. Really visiting. Not just conference rooms, kitchens. Good. Arya held out her hand. See you soon, Daniel. He took her hand, then pulled her into a hug. You saved me, he whispered. You know that, right? We saved each other, Arya whispered back. Daniel drove away as the sun climbed higher, painting the city in shades of gold and promise. In his rear-view mirror, he saw Oak and Ember Detroit lights on doors, opening staff, arriving for the day shift. And in the window, he saw Arya waving. Not the broken woman chopping vegetables at midnight. The chef she was always meant to be. Daniel pulled over a few blocks away and took out his phone. He opened his photos and scrolled to two images side by side. The first mom. The last bright day. Arya and her mother at the lake before everything shattered. The second mom. First bright day again. Arya and her mother on the porch, healed and whole and smiling. He stared at those photos for a long time. Then he added a third photo, one he'd taken this morning, through the kitchen window. Arya teaching her team surrounded by light and laughter and hope. Below it, he typed a caption, "From darkness to dawn." This is what recognition looks like. He sent it to Marcus with a message. Show this to the board. Tell them this is our new metric for success. Then he started the car and drove toward the sunrise. Because sometimes the best way to measure a company's worth isn't in dollars and cents. It's in the number of people who feel seen, who feel valued, who get a second chance at their dreams, and who pass that light forward to others in the dark.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.